Move on to the next piece, which is around acceleration and incentives. Another question for you. We often build acceleration into training programs, acceleration being the ability to test out or to prove you already know certain parts of a program so that you can move through it faster. New hire, not so much. We often think there's a place for it, but some organizations would like their new hire experience to be comprehensive and everyone goes through the same thing. I'd like to ask you if you think it's appropriate for a sales new hire program. Should people be allowed to accelerate through? No, they shouldn't, or you're not sure. And John, can you run that poll for us, please? Okay, thank you. So that's interesting. You're almost 50-50 split. 60% saying new hires should be allowed to accelerate, and 45, it changes every second, but the other 50 saying that no, it should be thorough and comprehensive, and a couple of not sures. And again, I don't think there's a right answer here, but let's have a look at the way a couple of people have done this. So this is the Whiskey Academy program. This was a program we put together for Diageo. It's for whiskey salespeople, business to business. The program is designed to create sales evangelists, people who are not only going to sell the whiskey product, but actually promote whiskey as a category and try and create a new whiskey drinking culture, particularly among young people. The program that we came up with moved through bronze, silver, and gold, and it's about acceleration, but it's also about incentive, and in what I think is a fairly unique way. Everybody takes the bronze program. The bronze program is essentially an online program for people who are already selling whiskey. They complete a series of online modules where they learn about the different types of whiskey, and they complete some online simulations, and it ends with a whiskey tasting experience. They're very aware as they move through the bronze experience that only a certain number of them will be allowed to progress through to silver. So only the top performers make it through to the silver program, where they enter into global ambassador training for the whiskey category for Diageo, and they start doing some in-market tasting sessions. So already you have this incentive to move from bronze to silver. It is a competition, and we all know salespeople are competitive, and competition works within sales training programs, but it's actually it's a real-life competition, because only the people who move from bronze to silver will end up taking these global ambassadorial roles and will obviously have that greater opportunity. From the global ambassador training, again, a very select number will move into evangelist status within Diageo, and they're rewarded with a visit to Scotland and the distilleries, where they learn firsthand about the distillery process, and they become part of a very small group of evangelists globally who will spread the word for Diageo around whiskey. So I wouldn't call this acceleration, but in terms of incentive, you're narrowing the field as you move through from bronze through silver to gold, and you're providing a huge incentive for individuals who want to get from one to the other and increase their opportunities within the organization. This is the piece we put together for the consumer product company. The piece I'd like to focus on first of all, we can see that the learners study in blocks, and they can progress from one block before they progress to another. So I'd like to highlight the fact that we have some e-learning courses at the beginning of the program, but they're separated into groups. So you have the first two topics, then you have 3, 4, and 5 together, then you have 6, 7, and 8 together. When the learners have taken the topics, they can take an assessment, and that will move them through to the next piece. The reason we arranged the program in this way is we felt that some people will come into the organization with a sales background in a similar environment, and they will be able to progress much faster through some of these blocks than others. So we like the idea that while they might be stuck in the e-learning phase cycle on one set of topics, on another set of topics they might be able to progress through the check-ins and move on into the group work where the real value in the training program begins. So we would anticipate seeing people at all different stages through this journey, depending on what they brought with them when they came into the company. It's an interesting model for acceleration because everybody does everything, but they do it at different speeds and at different times. And we'll come back to this in a moment when we start talking about how the surgeries work here. In terms of the acceleration piece, I'm going to return to the AstraZeneca model and highlight these two cycles. One of the issues they had with their sales team before we rejuvenated this program for them is the salespeople moved through the program too quickly, and they were talking to the doctors and the clients before they had a proper understanding of disease state behind the medicine and before they had a proper understanding of the medicine itself. So we instigated these loops in the training program. The learner goes into the loop and they don't come out until they've proven their ability to move on. They do that at disease state, and then a little further on they do it in what we call Science Week, where they start looking at the product itself, features, benefits, etc. So in terms of acceleration, some learners are able to move through that phase very quickly and progress through the program. Other learners will stay in that cycle for some time until they really nailed the disease state or they've nailed the product piece, and then they're allowed to move on. It does introduce an overhead and a headache in terms of people moving at different speeds, but it means no one gets to that final piece, the simulations, the knowledge assessment, and where they're let loose onto the clients until we're absolutely sure that they have mastered the disease state piece and the product piece. It's another model, and it works very well. So we'll come on to the next polling question. We're now moving on to talking about experts. Experts, as I mentioned before, are in increasingly short supply. Their time is very valuable. They have lots of callings on their time. I've seen programs run led by experts, and they've been extremely successful, but it feels increasingly that it's harder to make that happen in large organizations now. So I'd like to ask a question, and John, maybe you could open the poll here. What do you think is the best way to leverage experts in new hire training for sales? Would you have them lead the program? Would you use them sparingly, or not sure? Yeah, so I'm seeing that most people think they should be used sparingly, maybe 75 to 25. Everyone has an opinion on this. Nobody's not sure. I think we would agree with that, not necessarily because it's the best way to do it, but because it's the only way that you can do it at the moment, certainly. So we mentioned earlier that we have the blocks of e-learning. You can move through these blocks at different pace, and you move through an assessment piece, and then you come into what we call a surgery. So typically, the classroom is the reward for having completed the foundational e-learning. We pitched this slightly differently. We said, let's make use of the expert's time, doing what experts do best, which is solving other people's problems. So the face-to-face piece, or in this case, sometimes virtual, sometimes face-to-face, is what we call a surgery when you have an expert panel. And you can only enter that surgery when you've completed the foundational e-learning piece and you've shown through your assessment that you have a foundational understanding of the topics. So when you come into that surgery, you come in with questions that have arisen from the foundational piece, and probably with questions that have come out of your real work as well. They can be very short. In this case, they're an hour long. They tend to focus on a certain topic, and it means the discussion focuses very much on real issues that are coming out of the training. What it certainly isn't is a lecture from an expert. It's an opportunity for the people who are in the program to ask questions of the experts, and it generates discussion, and it also pulls out some excellent war stories. So in this way, we've actually managed to keep the expert piece to a minimum, but tried to squeeze the maximum impact out of it. And again, this has been very successful. The e-learning is self-paced. What they come to later in the program when we look at the workshop piece can be facilitated by managers or trainers. The genuine experts are only needed for those surgery or clinic pieces in the middle of the program. Again, just to touch back on the Whisky Academy we did for Diageo, once you get to Scotland, now you're really in the presence of the experts. You're talking to the master distillers, and they're giving you the pieces of information and the language that you're going to be able to use when you're making those high-level business-to-business sales. When you do get to Scotland, you feel that you have earned the right to be there. You've passed through bronze and silver. You've stayed in almost an X-Factor environment. You've managed to stay on the podium, and now you're hearing from the horse's mouth that genuine expertise that is going to have such an impact on the business that you